Hello, and welcome to the Evelyn Y. Davis Studios at the National Press Foundation. Today, we will spend some time with Kendall Heath of ABC News. Kendall is a booker and editorial producer for This Week with George Stephanopoulos. In her job, Kendall frequently books guests in topical segments so you, the viewer, can get the latest political news from Washington, D.C. and around the world. Today, we'll ask her, what makes a good pitch? Is there a way you prefer someone from the outside approach the program? And how does the show really come together? So all of this begins right now.
The National Press Foundation is a nonprofit dedicated to helping journalists cover complex topics with depth and accuracy. Our mission includes journalists around the U.S. and around the world.
I'm Amos Sneed, principal of the public affairs firm Story Partners. Today's interview is part of the National Press Foundation series of Turning the Table on the Media. So with that, Kendall, let's get started. How do I get my boss on your show?
Have a really good pitch. We get a lot of, emails and phone calls and pitches from various PR agencies or folks on the Hill saying, hey, get my boss on the air. But if there's not a valid reason, if you can't make a really good argument why your boss or your client is the absolute best person to speak to that particular day or that particular week or on a certain topic, it just kind of goes in one ear and out the other. So just have a really good pitch and be very specific and have availability. The worst ever is when someone pitches and says, oh, my boss would be great on this. And you say, okay, well, let's have them come at 3:00 today and do an interview. Well, they're in, South America for the week. So how about, you really have to be prepared to get your boss or your client ready that day. And if you can come even equipped with information like we have a studio ready, or they can come into your bureau, or they have this availability, or these are their big talking points that they'll want to make. It just makes my job easier knowing exactly what I'm going to get from that guest.
Gotcha. So right now the hot topic is Cuba. And there's probably in the U.S. right now, or even in D.C., 2 blocks from here, 100 qualified people who could talk about Cuba this Sunday. How do you choose?
It really depends on what part of the story we're looking to cover. If we were doing the programs that are happening today are doing the breaking news. They're wanting to, talk to anyone who, the family of Alan Gross. They're wanting to talk to the senators who are on the plane coming back. But for us on a Sunday, we have to kind of see what the story is going to be. Are we talking more about the larger repercussions in terms of the national picture and the international diplomacy that's not going to happen with embassies opening on either side? Are we going to look at the Pope's involvement in this and kind of lobbying both governments to come to a reconciliation? So it really just depends on what specific part of that story you want to hone in on. And also for us, especially on a Sunday, if Senator Leahy, who was on the trip and was very instrumental in this, if he's going to be on 3 or 4 or 5 programs between now and Sunday, he may not be the best person. But if he's going to say, we're going to do an exclusive with you and save everything we're going to say about this until Sunday, it makes a more compelling guest. So it really depends on where the story is going to be at the time that you're going to do the interview and the specific angle of the interview and of the story that you're going to cover.
So let's take a little mystery out of it. I mean, how do you find your guest? Where do you go?
Well, the first thing we do is, it's not very, very exciting, but we Google. If it's someone unknown that, you want to get a person who, kind of the stories that just come up. Someone who was in a train accident that has compelling video that posts online. Well, okay, you're going to Google and figure out where they're from and call friends, call work colleagues, call neighbors, call family members. You just have to kind of track them down. And sometimes that's a lot easier when it's like a senator and they have people. And, in Washington, there's a lot of people who have lots of people. So you can find those folks very easily. But it's kind of the regular folks that are often more difficult to find who may not have listed phone numbers. And you have to kind of track. We do have tools that can get us access to cell phone numbers and home address and stuff like that. But it's just a lot of detective work in terms of just tracking down the best way to find people. And often it's just going and physically knocking on doors, being a physical presence, just to get, an answer and in person. And it's a lot harder to say no to somebody in person than it is to hang up the telephone. So
Understood. Well, let me ask you this. So you have a guest, you really enjoy, what can a guest do to make sure they're invited back?
They can be articulate. I mean, there's nothing worse than booking a guest and they just freeze or sit there and don't contribute, or, don't kind of come with what you thought they would come with. So really, I think it's just being lively and animated and honest. The worst, especially in Washington, we get a lot of people who stick to their talking points. And
I don't believe you.
It's hard to believe, but we do. We have a lot of talking points. So the folks that are willing to be honest and not tell us something that they've been saying for, weeks at a time. And obviously those who want to break news, we love to have those kind of people back who say, I've got something new that's going to make headlines and I'm going to want to do it on your show. So, but really just in terms of other guests, it's just being, good television. So it's speaking in concise sentences, it's being animated and lively, it's engaging with other guests, and it really is being honest.
Now, journalism is a serious business, and I think anybody that's going to watch this webinar knows how serious journalism is. So I feel like we owe it to them to ask some really serious, hard-hitting questions. So do you think, and be honest here, do you think the University of Michigan football team will ever bounce back after this season?
I really hope so. As a Michigan graduate, I am very hopeful that we'll find a new coach and get us out of the slump that was the year, this past football season. So I've got hope.
Well, you're a good sport to answer that. All right, well, let's break it down. What does a normal week look like for you as you're putting the program together for Sunday? How does it go?
For a Sunday show, it's a little bit different since we have, 6 days to prepare. But a normal week starts with a minimal staff. The majority of our staff works Wednesday through Sunday, since that's our really kind of crunch time. But some of the staff starts Monday, Tuesday, because we are making phone calls and looking for stories and talking with folks and doing reporting, right on Monday morning first thing. So there's a small group of us that are there early on doing that, thinking of ideas, making phone calls. And then Wednesday, when the whole group gets in, it's kind of, firming up exactly what we think our program might be. For example, this particular Sunday, we've actually got a lot of news very early in the week. So, we've got the Cuba news, there's stuff going on with Russia, we had the Pakistan school incident, and we've got the Sony hacking. So we're looking at, okay, how do we tell these different stories? And we're assigning correspondents to start working on pieces. We are making calls, inviting guests on the show and waiting for answers. And just kind of depending week by week, it all flows depending on the news. So, Cuba may be a huge story today, but Friday something else may happen and we may have to, start from scratch and throw the whole show out depending on the news. But we try to be at least prepared to cover as many stories as possible, and then we winnow it down as the week continues.
So you're telling me something could happen on a Friday or a Saturday and it changes the whole show on Sunday? Something
could happen on Sunday at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. when we go on the air, and we would change the whole show.
Has that happened
since
you've been there?
It has. I think the last example, one of the when Ebola came to America, I think it was either Duncan or when the nurses were discovered to have the disease. I think that actually was announced on a Sunday morning. So we scrambled and got that. But a lot of overseas news too. We often are doing updates of, unfortunately, incidences of violence and stuff like that abroad. So we are updating the top of our show to reflect that and then continue. But one example actually a while ago was when Gabby Giffords got shot. That was a Saturday afternoon. I was in a movie theater. I was sitting down with popcorn and I got a phone call.
Wait. You had your phone on in the movie theater?
I did. And you know what? I really regretted that I did because, then you answer and you kind of have to leave the movie theater. But it's 1 o'clock on a Saturday and I get a phone call and it's, a congresswoman's been shot. That's all we know. Get into, and I was out at Tyson's with my sister and had to drive in and make phone calls, calling, Senator McCain and Kyle, Arizona, and figuring out. And then that night, our anchor went down to Arizona and we were live the next morning from Arizona on Sunday. So, a lot of things in terms of the Arab Spring, a lot of that happened on weekends with Friday prayers and Saturday. So we did change a lot of shows very, very late in the game.
So you look at the show on a Wednesday or Thursday. How much will that change between now and Sunday on a typical week?
In terms of looking at a show on Thursday?
If you said, this is the package, I think we're going to go with this right now, it's today. How much, what percentage of that will change between now and Sunday?
It really just depends on the week. For example, we're working on a piece today thinking, we've got this, New Orleans is going to announce that they're eradicating veteran homelessness. And we have had our Bob Woodruff has actually done several other pieces on it. So we're like, this would be a really great opportunity to showcase. He was in Phoenix, he's been in LA looking at veterans who are homeless. And, we're working on it, but then we started working on that on Monday, but the Cuba news just happened, so I'm not really sure if that's going to make it on air on Sunday. It really just, depends on what happens between now and then. And, we're getting daily, reports about this Sony hacking scandal and the, movie theaters being impacted and national security, so that could change dramatically between now and Sunday. It's just, a lot of it is kind of a waiting game and being prepared and ready to react. So, and making sure that we have all of the phone calls in early, just in case that story ends up being the important one we want to cover on Sunday.
How competitive is it with the other networks?
It's extremely competitive. It is, especially in the Sunday show world, it is extremely competitive because you're covering a lot of the same topics. Sunday shows are a little different now than they were 10 or 15 years ago, where it was just, the senator of the week and, talking heads arguing. Our show has really expanded to do a lot more tape and different kind of pieces and thoughtful conversations. So there are some times when we're doing a topic that another show isn't doing, but often you're all scrambling for the same top tier guests.
So say you've booked a top tier guest and breaking news happens on a Saturday and you've got to change it. Who makes that call to the guest and says, hey, sorry, you've got your Sunday back?
Usually it's the bookers. Yeah. So I have had that unhappy task several times and told, I'm sorry, we have to cancel you. And they've made all sorts of plans. They've, and often the DC folks are really pretty understanding. They get it. They've been through this before, especially if they're regulars or folks who've been on television a lot. They understand. But you better have a pretty good reason and good breaking news to justify that.
Well, Kendall, let's talk a little bit about you. You've obviously moved up very quickly in your career. Was there any advice that you got as you came up that's really resonated with you?
Good advice, I guess, was just to work hard and be honest. I mean, a lot of, I think booking especially, you can get into the bad habit of making promises you can't keep, or saying, oh, we're going to book you, and then when somebody better comes along, you drop somebody. And I think as a booker, you have to have a reputation that people trust you. That when you say, hi, it's Kendall from this week. George really wants you on the show. I'm not making that up. George really does want you on the show. And they can go to their bosses and say, I trust Kendall that this is legit and he wants you enough that let's commit now. Because if your reputation, you are a reflection of the show, and if that gets damaged, you have a much more difficult time booking the show. And I think the anchors who respect that, you can't book someone and then off them for no good reason. That there are shows that do have reputations of just booking and then offing and booking and offing.
And can you give me a list of those shows? No?
And you don't want that. So I think kind of maintaining your credibility and honesty has been an important tool that I've liked to use, and I think has made me a successful booker.
Let's stay on that. Say someone's right out of college and they get this great job and the great opportunity to work in this field. What advice would you give them?
Don't get pigeonholed.
Okay.
Don't just, there is no such thing anymore as I'm only a booker, or I'm only a writer, or I'm only a field producer. Nowadays, the jobs that we want entry-level folks to do, they are digital journalists. They are reporting, they're researching, they're writing, they are often shooting, they are putting things on the web, they are cutting it themselves. Often they're standing up in front of a camera reporting. And so I think the days of being very narrowly focused within news are completely long gone. You want someone to be able to do everything from start to finish, where you give them a camera and you give them a computer and they can write, shoot, report, and put the actual story up online without needing anyone or anything else. And we have the tools now to do that. So I really try to learn as much about this field as you possibly can, because it will help you move up to be able to say, hey, I don't need a producer to help me out in the field, or I don't need a .com person to help me get it up online. I can do that myself. That's what will make you successful, and news organizations want everyone to be able to do that.
So I've noticed a theme here. You've talked about the evolution of the Sunday show over the past 10 years. You've talked about the evolution of young people, young professionals coming up in the industry. Where do you see it going from here?
Wow. That's a good question. I do think it's going to be everyone doing everything. And I do think as we've already seen, it's a lot more citizen journalism. We've seen YouTube videos breaking news. We've seen, elevator videos making news. And there are cameras everywhere now. And I think that's really changing, the news business and just our culture in terms of everything is now reportable, and there are very few things that are actually off the record. And even when you say you're off the record, if you have a mic on, you're probably not off the record. So I think just everything now can be public is really going to affect where the news business goes.
Have you seen more of a shift from just domestic DC political focus on the Sunday shows to more of an international, more with the citizen journalism?
Absolutely. Because we can get videos from Egypt and showing people protesting and overthrowing their government. And you can't, before you were lucky if you could get a reporter to some of these places. And now we can see firsthand from social media, from the internet. So you do want to be there and report on it. And the images just create a powerful reason to make people pay attention. If they're seeing protests and burning flags and, violence, it's a compelling reason to make sure that you're bringing that to the U.S. audience, since they're seeing those images around the world.
Would you say is there someone on your team who's just monitoring the social media channels and seeing what's trending and what's getting a lot of traction? And that's probably completely different to 10 years ago when everything that was coming to the Sunday show was being pitched to you.
Yeah.
And now you're actually going out and grabbing it yourself.
Absolutely. Every network has a social media team, and every show has a kind of digital producer. And we do too, who monitors, what's going on Facebook. And there's a lot of also show interaction on social media. When George has an interview with the president, we're saying to folks, hey, what would you ask the president? And often George is taking some of those questions and bringing them into his interview. So there's a lot of back and forth between the audience and the shows now, thanks to social media.
So I know this is a high stress environment. You're dealing with high profile guests. You're firm offers, they're not firm. You change schedules. You're coming in. We cancel. There's breaking news. There's got to be some humor in it. What's one of the funniest moments you've had working in this industry?
Oh gosh. One of the funniest moments. I could tell you some of the worst moments. Some of the funniest, I think it's just, well, all right, this wasn't in my Sunday show world, but this was in I used to work in the morning show, and you book a guest, and it was a kind of real person story. I don't particularly remember it, but you talk to them on the telephone, and you book them, and you send them to New York, and they show up, and this particular guest didn't have any teeth. Okay. And it was a little bit, you're like, okay, well, you don't have teeth. It's not your ideal guest, but what are you going to do? So, stuff like that does happen. You really hope it doesn't, but it's live television. What are you going to do? So
no 2 days are the same?
No 2 days are the same. No two stories are the same. And certainly we've had, a fair share of different stories to keep us rolling.
So you get done, the show's done, everybody's high-fiving, you're excited, it's Sunday. Do you go home and watch all the other Sunday shows?
I probably should, but I take a little break. And we all try to catch up and watch the others, just because it's smart to know the competition and see what they're doing. And but you do need a little bit of a respite after that, and then you get up Monday morning and you do it all over again. So you
get up on Monday morning, you turn your television on or your phone on. Where do you get your news? Where all do you go?
We get a lot of our news, I think, kind of from the major news sources, but also we're looking at different outlets. Like, you are looking at what's trending on Facebook and see what people are talking about. You're reading kind of Politico and Playbook and stuff like that. You're also, I get a lot of news just from my ABC colleagues, looking at what they're reporting and what they're telling us and stuff like that. When Boston is a good example from that. I was actually in Boston when the bombs went off. I was on Boylston Street, not at the finish line. But when I saw the explosions, the first thing I did was I checked my work email, because I'm thinking, okay, well, ABC will know, one of my colleagues will know what's going on, and I'll be able to, is this a an accident in the tea? Is it a just store accident? What is this? And I didn't see anything. So I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm the only one here. I don't know if anyone else from ABC is here. So I email work and say, I just witnessed 2 explosions. And then it was special, they had seen also that it was happening, and special reports, and then I'm reporting from the front lines there.
Wow.
But really, it was the first thing I look at my BlackBerry to say, what is going on? Because my ABC colleagues will know.
Well, it sounds like you've covered many exciting events, both heroic and tragic. What's been one of your favorite moments?
Gosh, one of my favorite moments. One of the ones, in terms of booking, one of my favorite moments was was landing the first interview with Michelle Obama, her first television interview as a wife of a senator running for office. This was before, and I'd worked, I think, for 2.5 years just working on that booking, of calling and pitching Robin Roberts to her staff and meeting with them and building a relationship. And, just 2 years paid off in a very big interview that was highly promoted and, very newsworthy, because it really was kind of the first time we had her on television. And then, you do it, you're done. The next morning you wake up and it's like, okay, what's next? I just spent 2 years doing that, building up for that.
2 years for one booking.
Yes. So you do that though. And for the really important stuff you do. And I'm sure people have been spending 10, not for this current pope, but I'm sure people spent decades trying to book, John Paul, and people are still trying to book, Fidel even and stuff. It's the big ones are worth the time, hopefully. So
as someone who's so plugged in and you follow all of the news, is there ever a time that you just unplug?
Absolutely, as often as I can.
Really?
All day I have 4 televisions in my office. So the last thing I want to do when I go home is watch more television. So I try to unplug as much as I can, but it is rare. It's really nice to go out of the country when you can say, I don't have access, or but now you do, even on planes now. That used to be a thing. Like, okay, I'm taking a flight down to Astoria. I've got 3 hours just to not do anything. Well, Wi-Fi, the airlines have really, really screwed us with that. So excuse me, but yeah.
Well, thank you for all of this. Let me, so if anybody's watching this, they're probably wondering, okay, what insights can I get from Kendall to get my boss or my client on the show? What 3 tips would you give someone who is trying to get, their team or their people on this week? I
would say make a compelling pitch. Make sure that you are pitching me on an accurate, the story of the day that your boss is exactly fit for this particular topic. Be prepared in terms of knowing exactly what they're going to bring to the table and what they're going to say. There's nothing worse than someone pitching saying, oh, my boss would be great. And I say, okay, what does he think about X? And they're like, I'll go back and check. It's like, well, don't waste my time. Make sure that you know that before you call me. And 3, be timely. There's nothing worse than a breaking stories happening. If there's a school shooting and someone picks up the phone to talk to me about like an immigration vote that's happening in 3 weeks. Like, I am not thinking about that. I am like, know that you're calling a news organization and make sure you're not calling in the middle of breaking news, because you will not have that phone call returned.
On that note, is there a good time during the day to call? When do you prefer to get these calls?
I think probably not right in the beginning of the day and not right at the end of the day.
After your first cup of coffee?
Yeah, give them some time to go to get acclimated to the day and read in and all of that stuff. So yeah, I think kind of shoot for the middle of the day, but everybody's different. Some folks, don't ever want to hear pitches, and others are, I can kind of focus on that stuff in the afternoon. But I think it just kind of depends. So it also helps if you have a relationship with the person you're pitching. Also spell the anchor's name right. That's actually something that happened to me once. Stephanopoulos is not an easy name to spell, and I have gotten emails from folks saying, without his name being right. So yeah. And when I worked for a different anchor, when I worked with Christiana Mampour on the program, I had a lot of folks, one in particular who kept emailing me saying, Christine is so wonderful. I watch her every week. Christine. I'm like, her name's Christiane, right? Not Christine. So that pitch didn't go over so well. No. So yeah, just the little things count.
So emails, phone calls, direct messages on Twitter. What's the preferred method?
I like to have all the information in front of me. I don't like to get bombarded by emails, but I do think that having a concise, short pitch is really helpful instead of just a cold call. I mean, it's nice to follow up with a phone call after you've kind of sent the information to put it on my radar. But don't when you call, I may not have had a chance to read it. So if that's the case, give me a second to get caught up, and then throw your pitch at me.
Well, any last tips or advice for people trying to get on the Sunday show?
No, I think just
parting words of wisdom.
I think just make your pitches accurate, timely, and do your homework. Don't call me before you've done your homework, because I'm going to ask you questions and make sure that you have the answers to those questions so that your boss or your client can be, put in the forefront of our mind, not, so-and-so called me, but I'm not really sure what they're going to say. Have all the information and know exactly why that person would be the best person to be on this week.
All right, last question. Who's going to be on your show this Sunday?
We're still figuring it out.
All
It's
right.
early. This is Wednesday. This is our Monday for a lot of folks. So we're figuring it out, but I'll keep you posted.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Kendall.
Sure.
Thank you all very much for paying attention and spending some time with us today. Was joined by Kendall Heath, a booker and editorial producer with ABC News This Week. For more information, please visit nationalpress.org.